Hi, good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for joining us today. This is the Turnitin session on addressing integrity development for the real world. So for those of you who aren't 100% familiar with Turnitin, we are the leading provider in integrity solutions, and we operate with thousands and thousands of institutions globally. With quite high usage rate in the UK. Our mission is to ensure the integrity of global education and to empower students to do their best original work. My name is Pascal, and I am on the account management team at Turnitin, and I'll be leading you through the session today. I'm joined by Teresa and Darren, who I'll give you a brief introduction to in the next few slides. But what I really wanted to start with was giving you an overview of what you're going to get out of the session today, I guess, really. So we want to have a look at how Turnitin can help develop original thinking skills, and how does this prepare students for the workplace. So looking at skills gaps and what problems can occur when students don't necessarily have a full understanding of plagiarism. You know, what does this face them with in terms of preparing for maybe further education or in the workplace itself. And also we want to get some user insights into how students have benefited from having Turnitin embedded in their work process. Now, there's no better way really of getting an understanding about these things than actually hearing from users themselves. And I will get on to introducing our users in a moment. But what I guess the ask I have from everyone watching today is to think about what integrity means to you. Think about what integrity means to your institution, and think about what it means to your students. Do they have a full understanding of it? Where are they in their integrity awareness journey? And I guess I really want you to have a think about that throughout this session whilst we're listening to what our users have to say, and you can have a think about how you relate to their use cases, I guess. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce Teresa Johnson, who is a lecturer from New College, Swindon in caring professions and educational practice. And we also have Darren Cutler, who is a training and skills lead at Lincoln College. Now, as you can see, that's two completely different institutions, two completely different job roles, and that will offer us some really fresh perspectives and unique ways of looking at how they tackle integrity in their workplace and how Turnitin helps address that for the students. So I'm just going to come out of the share now, and we'll go into a bit of a Q&A session. So Teresa, I guess if you'd like to kick off, I'd love to know why is it important for students to write in their own voice?
Well, Turnitin has not been new for us.
Mm-hmm.
But we've used it in a much more organic way, a much more dynamic way than we have in the past.
Yeah.
But if you're looking at, integrity, it's not just about are you promoting people for professions. You're training people to be professionals in sometimes very difficult environments. Then they need to be ethical. They need to understand the difference between, wrong and right, but also those really vague areas of, well, I've kind of offered an understanding, but then you're the facilitator, you're the skilled helper telling them, yeah, that's great, but it's not your work. So own what isn't yours. You cite the stuff. So with the issue of integrity, it's not just as straightforward, I don't think, as being honest or dishonest, even if it's by mistake, because most of the time it is. It's also about comprehension of knowledge and the comprehension of I understand, and I'm critical of what I understand, and I'm also curious and creative and disciplined in where I'm getting my information from. So you're going to be trawling in different sources, credible sources, and then be critical about those. Again, I'm going to have to stop talking because I'll just rattle on and on and on. Sorry, I was going to soapbox about all these sorts of issues. So I'll stop at that. Sorry.
No, that's absolutely fabulous. This is exactly why we've got you on the call, so you can talk about these things. And I completely hear you. It's not just a black and white issue. There's a lot of shades of grey. And I completely hear that. Darren, do you have any thoughts to add to that question in particular?
Yeah, I agree with Teresa. It's not necessarily just about doing right and wrong. It's about being authentic, and we want to create people that can take this work further, and they need to be able to do the research and not just think they can go onto Google and put in whatever they want and they're going to pass the course that way. We're not providing apprenticeships which are just churning out apprentices that are lacking in quality anymore. I think there's been a bit of a gap with the quality of our apprentices, and that's from we do from level 2 all the way to level 6.
Yeah.
And apprenticeships have often been seen as the poorer relation to academic programs sometimes, and it's a real shame. I think part of that is the quality and the integrity has been lacking because previously we've let work through that perhaps we shouldn't have done, and without the software that's available to us, we wouldn't do that anymore. So I think that's what I'd add to what Teresa said.
Yeah, absolutely. And Darren, just from your perspective, using Turnitin with the apprentices, in what ways has Lincoln College started using Turnitin?
So up until probably about 6 months ago, we didn't have any software for apprentices to check their work. So we've used Turnitin as a college for years, longer than I've been here at the college. And we've used it through Moodle, which will probably be people will know about. So yeah, through RE Portfolio, which is one file, we've never used anything such as Turnitin. We've relied on assessors knowing their learners and spotting something. If they think it's not quite right, they will do a quick search, and it's not efficient, it's not effective. So about 6 months ago, we integrated Turnitin into one file. So any bit of evidence now which is uploaded in PDF, Word, Excel, etc., all goes through Turnitin as a matter of course. And because of how straightforward it is, it's just a press of a button, and our apprentices really don't mind putting that through. And it's the same for our assessors. It's no extra work for them. So they really don't mind doing it. So yeah, that's how we've used it over the last sort of 6 months or so. We're starting to get it more and more use now as we go through the programs, and our assessors getting more and more used to it.
Yeah, lovely. And the same for you, Teresa. How, obviously I know it's probably very different, but how are you using Turnitin at Swindon College right now?
Well, through Moodle. And because of COVID and lockdown, everything also is via Teams. So we've got a link for Turnitin through Moodle via Teams, because all portfolios for us are online, obviously. And what we've done is we've had all our formative assignments are through Turnitin, and then there's an extra tab behind that for the summative, so you can have them layered. And that way you can really be quite supportive. Although you're not going to offer them potentially a grade in the formative, you can actually do some real marking, and then they can see mistakes that they make on the formative before because for our course, the summative is that they can't resubmit for another summative higher grade. It is what it is. So all units or modules are offered formative. That's marked online through Turnitin, and then we offer the summative underneath that. It's quite interesting you talk about apprentices, because on the foundation degree where we've got the advanced apprentices, they're in the same cohort as the academic people, who are not apprentices, and they go through the same process. Yeah. They don't go through the same process as far as the work-based learning. That's a different kit caboodle completely, because that's an apprenticeship model. But the academic work, the same level, is required for all students, regardless. If you're on that level, you'll meet those standards. And then if you can't, we have also recognised with new staff that they need a great deal of support in that process to begin with, because the process is only as strong as the team delivering it. Because Turnitin is like, that's it, it's there and it's really helpful, but you have to apply and administer the tool. So we do make sure that there's mentoring processes for staff, sometimes even long-term staff who find it, no, that's not a definition, that's a level that's not required, and also not being scared to click the where did you get that information from and go to that university to release that piece of work, so you have a real clarity. So we use it for formative and summative, and that's on all level 3 and above courses in our department anyway. So BTEC, City and Guilds, up to level 6, that's what we're using, and it's working so far.
Yeah, no, that's amazing. Just looking at that formative side for a moment, why is it important for students to receive feedback on how to write with integrity from your perspective?
Well, I think feedback is just, I think it's an old trope about, you sandwich your feedback, you do this with feedback, you have to have that cycle of feedback. But ultimately, feedback is the absolute critical link between really applying what they've learned to demonstrating their learning through the assignment. So for feedback with the formative, it is also about, just check this source, this could be reworded, please, please indicate, because we'll do like less sort of 10 words or matched not coming up on Turnitin. So they'll have on the formative a little bit of a looser process, because there's only 2 pages. So it's all that process. For the higher level, the lower level, they can submit whatever your study wants you to submit. But the formative process for feedback, well, just feedback generally, that's about just checking, I think, not just the credibility of the sources that they've used or how well they've used it, but how well they've linked it and made connections. And sometimes you can get some real creative writing from them. Not narrative, but I mean creativity in how they've made the connection between what they've read and how they can apply it to what they're required to through their criteria. And I think feedback is important, because if it's a skim read, then it's a skim process. I think if you give detailed feedback relating to the process, it also builds a relationship with the student, that you really are taking notice of what they're writing, how they're writing, and how well they can develop their writing skills as well as their knowledge base. Then the application of developing all the other sort of components of, assignment writing. But for the feedback for integrity is that you're not going to be compliant or complicit with poor work, with lazy processes, and then you then are saying, I have high expectations of you, so why can't you meet them? And I think with the high expectations, with support, and if there's decent teaching with good resources, sky's the limit, so the feedback, even if they're distinction worthy, obviously you're still going to offer, supportive feedback of how they could have improved or what they could have used to, in this point, or in your previous unit you've used this, can you transfer some of your new knowledge, that knowledge into this new unit, or could you have developed this point, and think about some of the connections that, I mean, for instance, I've just done one about Karl Popper, and have you thought about how Popper could be utilized now in relation to tolerance, which is huge, and then they have to go off and find information. So the feedback can narrow or widen their research, as well as, the general, this is how we're going to improve our writing skills, and the application of, have you done what the criteria has requested you in your task? have you demonstrated other aspects that will give you value to your assignment?
Yeah, no, I hear that. Darren, from your perspective, in the apprenticeship side of things, what's your process around formative and summative assessment at the moment? Where do you guys apply feedback? What does that look like for you?
Well, I have to be honest, we're not as good as Teresa by the sounds of it at providing that formative feedback through Turnitin. Because it's relatively new to us from an apprenticeship point of view, we're using it from a summative point of view to provide feedback. But our learners, we allow them to upload as many times as they want to onto Turnitin.
Yeah.
And it's really interesting, the education and the development of them and where you see them at. We try really early on, so level 2, we try and get them to upload through Turnitin, and then we're more insistent when we get to level 3, 4, etc.
Yeah.
But our level 2s want to see it, and they're trying to get 0% on their score when that gets returned. And that development, when they upload and they're really happy because they got 0%, and you have to sort of, it's a bit disappointing because you kind of take that away from them and say, well, it is good, but you know, if you develop it a bit more, we're going to expand your writing, and maybe you're going to get up to 10%. So you are using some other sources. They're going to start using it in that way. So it's a slightly different tool, and then we get to level 5, 6, etc. And we're at a level now where we can really use it effectively.
Yeah.
People are checking to see what score they're getting because they're a bit worried about it. But for me, I don't know. I don't think that's quite right, and I don't necessarily agree with that approach and on how they take. And lots of people ask me, you know, what's the maximum I should be achieving? If I get to 50%, will I fail? If I get to 40%, will I fail? That's quite interesting, because my point of view is no. Depends on what you've done within that work. You can use 50% academic sources. They can be the best sources in the world. You've referenced perfectly. You've created balanced arguments, and at degree level, as I'm sure Teresa probably marks at that level as well, at degree level, it's perhaps going to be a first. But I've got somebody else at level 3 that's got 50%. It's all copied from ukessays.com, which I see time and time again. So I think, yeah, that part of it and the feedback we use for them is formative, but we haven't developed in such a way that Teresa has, and that's something we'll be striving towards as we move forward as well.
Yeah. To be fair, I think part of the reason why we developed that is to reduce our marking load, because then you've got the formative, and you know, you get the percentage at the beginning, and then we look at what's similar and what's plagiarized, you know, and then at the summative, so there's 2 tranches of marking. So ultimately, it's not because we're like super organized. In actual fact, well, maybe a little bit, but in actual fact, what it's really about, it is about having quality of work, maintaining the fact that you don't have too many choices. So you've got to be on your end game. You know, you've got to plan, you've got to time manage, you've got to organize yourself. And this is a responsibility that you have as a student. So you crack on. So if you haven't, because then you have to meet the requirements of the awarding bodies about how many times they can, you know, submit assignments, and different awarding bodies have different rules. So we did the summative and the formative one. So it was formal. It was all online because, you know, lockdown from last year as well. We did, you know, some formative used to go through email, but over the lockdown, we decided as a team that was just a really bad idea, because you can't track it well. You know, let's have one place and then one communication of where students need to do that. So for the level 3 who are going to go off to university, that prepares them for the university process. For those that are staying with us to do their HE or further, you know, FE with us, then they know what they need to do. And when it comes to deadlines, when it comes to assignments, there's not a constant ongoing of submission. To me, that would be, I'd be in a cycle of marking forever. It'd be, you know, I wouldn't enjoy that. So the whole idea about making that process as quite tight as it is to if you're teaching, 170 people, all different levels, at some point the deadlines are going to keep coming. And then you've got the formative, and then you've got the summative, and then you might have remedial work that you need to mark, which we make sure goes through Turnitin as well. So we'll have a resubmit button. So it's formative, summative, resubmit, and they get one chance for all of them. And if they miss the date, they miss it. And this is about making sure that they've got some discipline. But yet again, it's different, different cultures, different requirements for students, different processes. When I speak to the plumbing guys, they say, "Oh, we tried to turn it in, but nobody used it." Well, I'd just give them a Paddington Bear stare and make them use it. I'm not marking it till it goes through there, So I think you've got to have a complete team buy-in for it as well.
I think you're right. I was I used to be a bit old-fashioned with my marking and love paper in front of me and printing and writing everything on there. But if lockdown has taught us one thing and working remotely, it's that if we can do it all digitally, it's going to make us so much more efficient and effective in getting the work marked, as you said, in the first place, but then getting that feedback back to the learners rather than having it printed and handing it back and never know if you're going to see that bit of paper again, if they're reading the feedback, etc.
Yeah, and deadlines are very clear. The expectation for the students are really obvious. They can then do, they could access a one-to-one support if you've got that process available. So all of that, are within time sessions, because, like all of us, we go home and we do work from home that we're, all grumble about, but we do it because we believe, passionately about education. So when you're looking at, feedback and the process of Turnitin, even if you have, so I do all that and mark on Turnitin, but then I have to write a separate feedback form for the awarding body, which then gets sent to them, via their e-portfolios, which kind of mirrors what's on Turnitin. I don't personally like the rubrics. I write them as I read it. Bit old school, I must admit. I'm normally, before lockdown, paper copies, pen, while I'm doing it. So marking would take some time. However, the process is straightforward. Applying it isn't quite so straightforward. And then I have the with Access, for instance, which is for 19 years and over. Of course, it's a level 3 to get into university. Significant number of people don't have English as their first language. So then it comes to the culture of plagiarism. That's just research. Okay, no, it's not. Yes, it is. Well, we can argue, but you'll get a pass. Or you do it twice, you're off the course. So, and that's, and they look at me and they think, I don't know whether she's nice or not. So they all don't like me at the beginning, but at the end of the year, it's like, oh my God, look at my grades, they're fab, I'm in, because that's the whole point. The whole point is prepare them for the real world, which is if you don't meet the requirements and the standards, you can't go, oh, my dog ate it. I lost it on the bus. It's like, I get that. I understand life's complicated. That's great, but you still got to crack on and do the work. But you've got to do it to the highest standards you could possibly do, and I'm going to help you with that. So when it comes to also people's cultural background relating to what research is, that's very clear. That's written in their student handbooks. There's all talks about this in induction week and in the first 6 weeks of like the census of any program. This is constant. It's almost a session by session embedding. This is not permitted. If you don't understand, ask. Go to the academic support people. Come to speak to me informally. We'll talk about it. Tell me what you want to do. Right, I can see where you are. So it'll be little things like, okay, so so Darren comes to me and says, I don't know how to paraphrase this, so I've just written it, but I referenced it. So how can I be plagiarized? I've referenced it, but you have to paraphrase it. That shows me that you've comprehended, but you've also not plagiarized in the true meaning of the word of not plagiarizing. So if I had a conversation with you, Darren, it would be to the student, I would say something like, oh, so we were talking about feedback and plagiarism and Turnitin and marking summative and formative. Darren, what? Well, that's what you've just said. So if I was paraphrasing it, I would say, Darren, or Cutler, 2021 suggests that. And then I would say, as if I would, how I wouldn't do it verbatim, I'd say it how I would to my friends maybe, but using academic language. And they seem to really understand that better, rather than that I must go on Google, academic scripts, and then they get really confused. It's like, why have you used them? We put so many resources for you on Moodle. Try them first, and as you develop, go for it. So it is quite interesting how supportive sessions for students, depending on their generation as well as their culture, has had impacts on, I need to reinforce constantly the message and make sure that's a team issue. It's really frustrating when there's somebody in the team goes, yeah, but they're really nice. It's not what it's about. Of course they're really nice. They've got to own the work though. You know, be accountable, role model that integrity, and that way it becomes a new normal.
Yeah. And from what you both said there are you can see it's completely different for every student. There's different levels of integrity already instilled there, right? And I guess it's your job trying to get that to a consistent level and developing that further and further. But I guess, what challenges do you see students coming across when they don't have a full understanding of plagiarism? Like, because obviously you'll have some that are higher on the level of understanding and some that don't fully grasp that concept yet. What sort of challenges do you see them encountering when they don't have that full understanding?
I think I would go back to the point I made earlier about people wanting to get the 0%. The 0%ers that think they shouldn't be looking at anybody else's work. They can't take anything else. It all has to be their own writing in their own words. They're not going to read anything else, do anything else. And that's a worry in itself, and that's a bit of a danger. I tend to find that is, as we said, the less developed, less academically developed students on the lower level courses, because as we're getting through, we are challenging that and making sure they understand fully. And then moving forward and looking at our higher levels, people are just concerned, and I think for me, it is. I think, like you said, Teresa, it is a generation thing. I've got students that have come that are perhaps 18, 19, 20 that have done the traditional route, if you like, from A levels to higher education with us, and that might be on. So we run the Chartered Management Degree Apprenticeship, which has the degree embedded within that. So we've got some that are 18, 19 that have come through that, and we've got some others that are in the 40s, 50s, and it's just really interesting that the younger learners on those sort of programs, they get it, they understand what they're trying to do, they get the research behind it, because that's been ingrained into them for quite a few years now. If they've come through us at college, then we've used it from day one that they've been here. Whereas the others, they struggle. But they don't just struggle with plagiarism and Turnitin, they struggle with research and what that research actually means and what they're trying to find out. Do they need to read a whole book? So I took 2 marketing books into my degree lesson last week. And I said, if you want some useful reading for this module, there's these 2 books. We have to read all of that? No, you don't have to read the full book. So yeah, it's really interesting how we develop them and change the mindset.
Yeah,
having different learners within the group really helps with that.
Yeah. So just another question from me on there, Teresa. I don't know, did you have something to add to that, or?
Well, I've on the Access course that's mostly for adults. So the youngest learner is 19. Our oldest learner this year is 57. So there's a huge age range.
Yeah.
And what we worked out to be the best thing over a number of years was that do the study skills first. If you can get them in the summer, if you can get them some prep work, if you can get them to do formative work, particularly if they're older, it's this fear of failing and get it. It doesn't matter how great the work is, just submit it. We can work from there. So there's no judgment, there's no blame, there's no shame. It's this is where you are with it. This is really good. I can see where you've gone from here, but you know, maybe next time you could have thought about adding this. You talked about it in class, write it, you know, and it's like knowing your learners is so important. And I think where most of them who are older have families and jobs and are doing the course, you know, obviously with apprenticeships, of course they've got jobs, but they're complicated lives, you know, and some of them have been homeschooling and all that sort of stuff through lockdown. They're looking for shortcuts, not shortcuts necessarily for integrity, but shortcuts for, I'm in front of my PC for 4 hours to do 1,000 words. Because you're not actually working, you're online banking, you're shopping, you're on social media. Take those down and just do 40 minutes, take a break and come back. And if that doesn't work, you'll find something that does, you know, and it's getting them to try and be a little bit adventurous. For plagiarism and academic dishonesty, for those aspects, I think for some people, they also come with, whether they're old or young or in between, they sometimes come with a comet of baggage of poor expectations and poor experiences from schools, from FE, from other workplaces. And, you know, I don't know anybody with a pulse who doesn't have a bit of baggage. So, you know, and it's about saying, well, okay, I get that, you know, and empathizing with it, but then giving the responsibility back to them. But what are you going to do that's different? And this is how you can be different. You can own this. Okay, so you don't get a 68%, you get a 58%. But this is really brilliant work that you can develop on because it's yours. You've done everything right. You know? So at the beginning of it, I'm saying to people, if you reference UK essays for me, tutor for me, any of the answer things, I'm going to give you the work back. I'm not interested. It's not a credible source. I don't want to hear the word Wikipedia. I know that's like a bit controversial because a lot of people don't mind it, but this is me. And of course, when they first meet me, they don't know what to do because I'm me. So I kind of like really heavy-handed at the beginning of the year, a bit trunchbally. This is what you'll do. I'm going to make sure you get fantastic grades if you do the work alongside me. I'm not doing the work for them. I've done my quals. So and once you develop those skills, they become integrated into your personality, and it's not something that you have to, you know, wear like a coat. It becomes who you are. So you start thinking, yeah, but are they telling the truth? Where's the evidence for that? And you think, yes, I've got there, because that's about academic integrity. That's about, is the work that I've said with my ID number is mine. So I've used all my sources, I referenced properly and appropriately, and I've been able to link certain places together to get what I need from my module. If you have somebody who understands plagiarism versus similarity, then you've got a real area of greyness that's more clear, because a lot of staff don't recognize the difference between similarity and plagiarism, because there is and are only so many ways you can say, you know, psychology is, you know, so the similarity will be there, which is why I never bother about the 0%, but I really see where you're coming from, because they get very competitive about that. But it's about what's plagiarized, you know. Then, you know, I give them, you know, the example of well-known people that have plagiarized and what's happened to them, about students that have plagiarized and then they can't follow on after 7 years of study because they've been struck off because they don't meet the academic or the ethical conditions. So I'm really lucky in a lot of ways because I teach ethics, and because ethics and equality and diversity are really embedded in the coursework that I'm teaching. I think it's probably easier for me because it's part of what they're doing. And most of them, because it's nursing and healthcare, most of them are going into a process where they have to meet, the council's requirements. And if they don't, they'll get struck off. So this is you can't do this on the ward. This is bad practice. This is bad practice writing. You can't do that, and we're not going to slide it through. So I think that Turnitin is fantastic, but ultimately it's only good as the team behind it, because you can ignore 80%. Oh, it's about definition. No, it's not. Well, you got subheadings of definitions everywhere. Call the other one, mate. So you can really, really use it, and then what you become. But that's hard work, and to begin with, you'll be very unpopular, but it's worth it, because what you end up with is years on years of professional people who understand integrity. If you can understand it academically, you'll get it. And that's then who you become. So you'll constantly be striving and be critical of what you're reading. So you're not just passive learners, you're active learners, and then you develop your own style of learning, of reading, and you go, no, I don't like that. I can see the bias there. Where at the beginning of the year, they didn't even know what bias meant. So yes. So you're like, hips up into the old staff room. Today was a good day.
Yeah, absolutely. So, just rolling that back a little bit, from what I've heard from both of you there, you both touched a lot on, I guess, insecurities and confidence around how students are developing their own integrity, and their level of where they're at with integrity. And again, that confidence in the integrity, like you've just rightly explained so beautifully, it really does impact the workplace nature, that real world time. I guess in what you do, how are you using Turnitin to sort of help boost that confidence? How are you using it to sort of settle some of those insecurities? Again, speaking like across the different levels we've got going.
It's a challenge. It's a challenge for me, and for me being from our department, being relatively new with apprentices going through, and I'm not sure we've gone through and seen the full impact of that yet, because we've only been sort of 6 months in, seeing that full impact of where that confidence comes from. It's difficult for me to quantify at the minute, but it's easier than my other colleagues, because I look after business and workplace learning. So I don't have plumbers and electricians and builders that we're fighting, I think as Teresa said towards the start, fighting to get them to upload their evidence into Turnitin. I'm relatively fortunate in that. But those confidences, I think we'll see, and we'll get that feedback from the employers, that we'll see that as we develop, and within the next 6 months or so, as we start to get people finishing who have gone through a full year or full 18 months using Turnitin consistently, we'll start to see that development then. Yeah.
Teresa, anything to add on that note?
Only as far as what I can say is that we've had students, so the Access is a 1-year course. The foundation degree obviously is 2 years, and then the top up for the full degree is 3 years. And then you can see the learning curve. So the grades go up higher the more you push integrity, because they have to find different sources. And then with the other people who use the Access course to go out to a different university, they fly the nest. I often get emails saying, thank you ever so much. I know how to reference. I know how to do this. I'm getting really good grades. And a lot of A-level students don't know what they're doing because they're not going through Turnitin. So I know I've not had anything bounce back. It's really, really working. And year on year, and I've been sort of running the Access department here for 4 years. and I've worked here 11, every year it's thank you for helping prepare me for that higher level or the higher standard. Or at work, I have to be able to offer a rationale while I've done something. You know, I have to argue my corner, and having academic integrity makes you critical, makes you think, makes you select. You know, so I think all those ones in all those issues are really helpful in the real world, because you integrate those skills within your personality. And it might be that you say, oh, right, well, how's a plumber going to do that? How's a brickie going to do that? Well, of course they do, because then they think about what they're doing, because, you know, they're decent human beings. Academically, I think that if Turnitin isn't used from the minimum from level 3 onwards, then you get massive dropouts either in work or university, because they're not prepared. They don't have the skill, and you've got to teach that skill. So that person who doesn't want to submit that assignment because they're worried about it or they're not used to it, well, you prepare them, and that's what you do. And you prepare them at the beginning. So at the end of whatever 18 months, you're going to have somebody that goes through all their process. They go through their, you know, the gateway, they get their assessment and everything, and yay. And then the next thing you know, you see them advertising because they've got their own little business run up. And then they deal with that in an academic, you know, integral way, because you've facilitated that. I know it sounds really cheesy. I think we're in a really, really gifted place. Hard work, obviously we're not paid enough. But the impact that we can have on people that's to the positive for their future. And then they teach their children this, because there's nothing so positive and powerful as an adult studying at home with children. It's not do what I do. Sorry, it's not do what I say, it's do what I do. I am the best role model if you're studying for your children, because they have to get their heads down. Sorry.
Yeah, no, I hear that. It's laying that foundation for it to then be fed forward, right? You know, lay that foundation. Once somebody's got a good understanding, it then feeds forward into other people in their lives, into everything that somebody does in their lives. So it's beautiful. It's really beautiful what you're both trying to say, and the insights that you've given us today. I'm really aware that we're due to wrap up time-wise soon. I just kind of wanted to ask one last quick question to you both, really. Since implementing Turnitin, and, you know, after everything we've spoken about today, with the development of the integrity, how you see it, formative or summative assessments, what impact has Turnitin had on the number of cases of plagiarism you've seen? Have you seen differences? Like, where are you both at on that scale?
So for me, I was never in doubt. Before Turnitin was embedded to one file, I didn't think our learners were plagiarising, copying work. I didn't question their integrity, and that wasn't the purpose for integrating Turnitin necessarily. Yeah. It was so that my managers, our assessors, we had a level of confidence that the work we were getting was quality work. It was being supported with academic sources that were used correctly, and that we're creating quality learners at the end of their programme. And that was a lot of the point in putting it through. We had other reasons. There was reasons around getting our EQAs to sign off, so we've got direct claim status, etc. And one of the reasons was that we had something such as Turnitin embedded to help with that. But it's more for me, it's more of a holistic view about the quality and that end point and where we get that learner to.
Teresa, anything to add to that? Or
I think it also just enhances the reputation of the educational setting, you know, because it's objective. It's not your view. It's not your opinion. It's an objective software package that, you know, doesn't have to be disciplined, or doesn't have to be this, or doesn't have to be on their game all the time. It's there, objectively without, 24/7, and it does nothing, I don't think, but enhance the reputation if it's used well.
Absolutely. That's fantastic. Okay, guys, we're coming up to time. I would love to continue asking you questions and hearing all the views that you've got to give. But I'd just like to say thank you both for your time today. And it was really insightful for me, and I'm sure it was insightful for everybody that's viewing. For everybody else that's watching, if you have questions, feel free to pop over to the expo section where our booth is, ping some questions over to us, ping your thoughts over to us, what integrity means to you, because we'd love to hear from you. And yeah, thank you very much. Thank you very much for the session today, guys. I've really enjoyed it, and I hope everybody else has got something from it as well.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.